Beneath the polished glass of Toronto's skyline stands a building that has seen the city grow, grieve, and glitter for nearly a century. The Fairmont Royal York Hotel is no ordinary hotel. To most, it is a jewel of Canadian history, chandeliers, red carpets, and the gentle hum of piano music drifting through its halls. But when the guests have gone quiet, when the lights dim to a golden hush, the hotel begins to remember. The Royal York opened its doors in 1929, the proud crown of Toronto's hospitality. In those early years, its corridors echoed with the laughter of travelers, railwaymen, and visiting royalty. But some guests, they say, never checked out. Staff have spoken in careful tones about the 19th floor, where the air always feels just a little colder, as if someone invisible is passing by. One night, watchmen once reported the faint echo of footsteps walking beside him, only to stop when he did. When he turned, the hall was empty, save for a mirror that caught his reflection and something faintly behind it, watching back. There's a legend of a man in a gray suit, believed to be a former railway worker, seen wandering the mezzanine late at night. Sometimes elevator doors open to empty air, as though responding to a call from another time. And there are the whispers, staff, decades apart, describing the same quiet voice near the ballroom, humming a tune that no one recognizes but everyone remembers, a song that feels older than the building itself. But what's most haunting about the Royal York is not the ghostly footsteps or cold spots, it's the stillness, the kind that makes even the ticking of a clock sound like history breathing. When the lights reflect off the polished marble and the city hum fades outside, the hotel seems to stand at the edge of two worlds, one waking, one remembering. And yet, as haunting as it is, the Royal York's energy isn't cruel. It feels like memory itself, gentle, looping, unwilling to be forgotten. A doorman once said, "This place isn't haunted by ghosts, it's haunted by time." Perhaps that's the truest kind of haunting there is. As the night deepens and the wind off Lake Ontario sweeps across the streets below, we move south, toward a town where spirits walk openly, their stories woven into every cobblestone and candle flame. Niagara-on-the-Lake, a place that looks too peaceful to hold the echoes it carries. It's here that the Prince of Wales Hotel stands. Elegant, Victorian, beautiful in the soft light of dusk. Tourists come for romance, for history, for the scent of roses that drift through the air each summer. But those who stay the night sometimes leave with something else, a memory they can't explain, a whisper that doesn't quite belong to this century. The story begins during the War of 1812, when the town was caught in the crossfire between nations. Homes burned, soldiers fell, and one young woman, a civilian named Molly Maguire, as local legend calls her, was struck by a stray bullet while tending to the wounded. She died instantly, her spirit bound to the place where her kindness ended. The Prince of Wales Hotel, built later upon that same ground, became her home, and perhaps her prison. Guests in room 207 have spoken of a soft sobbing sound near the window, a mirror fogging over in the middle of the night, as if someone had breathed upon it. Staff tell of bedsheets tugged ever so lightly, and the faint scent of lavender when no one is there. One visitor, an elderly woman from Alberta, wrote in the guest book, "I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps pacing the hallway. When I opened my door, there was no one there, but I could still hear the steps moving away, as though down a hall that no longer existed." The Prince of Wales isn't a place of terror, it's a place of remembrance. Each flickering candle, each creaking stair seems to carry her name, softly, endlessly. Some say Molly's spirit lingers not in sorrow, but in loyalty, guarding the hotel she never meant to leave. And perhaps that's what binds so many of Ontario's ghosts, not anger, not fear, but the tenderness of unfinished stories. They are not trapped, only waiting, like music without its final note. Outside, the streets of Niagara-on-the-Lake glimmer beneath lamplight. The river runs quietly toward the dark, and if you listen closely, you can almost hear it, the sound of footsteps crossing from one world to another. And so, as the night deepens, our journey through haunted Canada begins in earnest. From Ontario's grand hotels to the forgotten fields of the prairies, the spirits of this vast land have stories still to tell. Echoes Beneath the Prairies, Part 1. The prairies seem too open, too full of sky to keep secrets. But at night, when the wind moves low across the fields, it sounds almost like breathing, slow, steady, endless. The sound slips through the streets of Winnipeg and presses against the walls of the Fort Garry Hotel, a building as proud as any cathedral and just as haunted. The Fort Garry opened in 1913, a palace of stone and velvet built for the glory of the railway age. In those days, travel was romance, and this hotel was the heart of it. But where there is love, there is loss. And where there is loss, memory takes root. Most who work there know the story of Room 202. It's said that many decades ago, a young bride and her husband came to the Fort Garry for their honeymoon. One morning, a telegram arrived. Her husband had been killed in an accident. She locked the door, and grief became her last companion. Ever since, guests in that room have woken to see a woman in white sitting at the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, her face turned toward the window as if still waiting for him to return. Sometimes the door to 202 opens on its own. Sometimes the lights flicker just as the sun goes down. A hotel manager once said quietly, "She's not frightening. She's sad, like a song that can't end." Another guest told of feeling the mattress sink beside her, as though someone invisible had sat down gently in the dark. She turned on the light. The bed was still indented, but no one was there. Downstairs in the ballroom, music sometimes echoes when the building is empty. Faint, slow waltz music. A melody from another century that drifts through the halls, searching for partners long gone. There is a beauty in the Fort Garry's haunting, as if love itself refused to fade. Even skeptics, when they leave, carry a feeling they can't quite name. That time, here, does not flow in a straight line. It circles back, gently, endlessly. And yet the prairie wind moves on, carrying with it the sound of the trains that built these towns and the laughter that once filled their hotels. As we follow that wind west, we reach another city, another landmark of stone, and another story that refuses to rest. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. The South Saskatchewan River glitters beneath the moonlight, and on its bank rises the Bessborough Hotel, the castle on the river. Built in the 1930s, it was meant to be a symbol of elegance, a promise that even in hard times beauty could endure. But as with all great places, beauty came with shadows. In the early years, workers whispered about the sound of footsteps in empty hallways and about one particular room on the upper floor, a room that no longer has a number. Guests reported a sudden chill there, a sense of being watched, a faint scent of perfume lingering where no one had been. One night, as the story goes, a maid entered the room to find a woman in a long blue gown standing by the window. The maid apologized for disturbing her, turned away, and realized the reflection in the glass showed an empty room. When she looked back, the woman was gone. Later, guests began speaking of the lady in blue, a spirit who appears near the old elevators or walking quietly by the river, her dress glowing faintly in the dusk. Some say she was once a performer, others believe she was a guest who lost someone in the hotel during its construction. No one really knows, and perhaps that's what keeps her here. The ache of an unfinished story. The Bessborough still stands as one of Canada's great hotels filled with laughter, weddings, and music. But sometimes, late at night, when the hallways are silent and the river outside turns to silver, a single soft note echoes through the corridors, as though someone, somewhere, is still dancing alone. The prairie towns sleep beneath the stars now, their windows glowing faintly like lanterns. The wind moves through the wheat fields, carrying echoes of trains, footsteps, and voices half-remembered. And as it travels farther east, it gathers new whispers, of salt air, of gulls, of the Atlantic tide calling through the night. The Atlantic coast is a place of stories. Fog rolls in without warning, and when it does, sound changes. Footsteps grow softer, voices fade, and the air begins to hum with memory. In Halifax, Nova Scotia, that hum seems loudest near a familiar corner. The Five Fishermen Restaurant, a place so warm, so inviting, that few would guess how much sorrow lies beneath its floors. Before it was a restaurant, the building had another life, several in fact. Built in the early 1800s, it first served as a schoolhouse, filled with laughter and the scratch of chalk on slate. But history changed its course. By the early 20th century, it became a funeral home, one that handled two of the greatest tragedies in Atlantic history: the sinking of the Titanic in 1912 and the Halifax explosion of 1917. Hundreds of bodies were brought here, sailors, passengers, and townspeople, their fates sealed by sea and fire. And though time rebuilt Halifax, some say the building never quite let go of its sorrow. Today, diners speak of cold spots in certain corners, of glasses rattling when the room is still. Staff tell of doors that open by themselves, and footsteps echoing from upstairs long after closing. One chef once swore he saw a man in an old naval coat walking through the kitchen wall, silent, proud, gone in an instant. Another, locking up for the night, turned off the lights and felt a hand brush his shoulder. He said it wasn't cold. It felt human, as if someone simply wanted him to know they were still here. The Five Fishermen is not a place of fear, it is a place of remembrance. Each plate, each flickering candle seems to carry a quiet respect, as if the spirits there have learned to stay not out of anger, but because they are finally being remembered. And yet beyond the comfort of Halifax's glow, the ocean calls again, and with it another story darker and older. Far across the cold waters lies Newfoundland and Labrador, where cliffs rise high and the wind has the sharpness of salt and legend. Here stands Signal Hill overlooking St. John's, a place where the first transatlantic wireless signal was received by Marconi in 1901. It's a monument of human progress, but also a place where the sea and sky seem to whisper to one another, a conversation the living can only half hear. Long before the radio towers, Signal Hill was a fortress. Soldiers watched from its ramparts through fog so thick it blurred the boundary between earth and cloud. Many never returned from the battles that swept this coast, and the hill remembers. Travelers often speak of strange lights, bright orbs glowing and moving across the cliffs even when the night is clear. Sometimes they hover, sometimes they dart upward like sparks from an unseen fire. Locals call them the ghost lights of Signal Hill. Scientists have tried to explain them: static, mist, reflections. But the old fishermen just smile. They say those lights are the spirits of soldiers and sailors, keeping watch long after their posts were abandoned. And on the windiest nights, when the ocean roars against the rocks, some claim to hear faint music carried in the air. A bugle, perhaps, or a snatch of an old marching song dissolving into the fog. Visitors describe a feeling there. Not dread, but awe. Standing on Signal Hill at dusk, with the sea below and the wind around you, you can feel how thin the veil truly is. The land seems to breathe with you, the horizon blurs, and for one fleeting moment, the centuries fold into one. The Atlantic coast sleeps fitfully. The sea keeps its secrets close, but sometimes, just sometimes, it allows a whisper to escape. The waves reach out, touch the shore, and retreat, as if even they are haunted by what they carry. And so we leave the shore behind and turn west again, toward forests that swallow sound and mountains that hide the past in mist. There, in the wild heart of British Columbia, new stories wait. Not of mansions or hotels, but of places where the land itself remembers. There are places in Canada where silence is not the absence of sound. It is its own kind of voice. In the deep green hush of British Columbia, mountains rise like ancient sentinels, and the fog drifts slow and deliberate, as if it too remembers. The first of these memories stands proudly on a hill above the sea, Craigdarroch Castle, in the quiet heart of Victoria. Built in the late 1800s by coal baron Robert Dunsmuir, the castle was meant to be a monument to wealth and ambition. Stone towers, stained glass, carved oak, it was a house designed to defy time itself. But time, as always, had its own plans. Dunsmuir died before the castle was complete, and from that day onward the home seemed to carry his absence like a shadow. Visitors today speak of a strange stillness in the upper rooms. A piano plays softly, though no one is near it. Footsteps echo down the main staircase, steady, unhurried, as if someone is inspecting their home long after it should have been empty. Staff have reported the sound of silk rustling in empty corridors and the faint scent of cigar smoke drifting through rooms that have been sealed for decades. One caretaker once told a story to a visiting journalist. He said that late one winter evening, while closing the castle, he heard laughter, faint, elegant, and unmistakably human. He turned a corner and saw for just an instant the figure of a woman in a high-collared dress descending the staircase. When he blinked, she was gone. He said he wasn't afraid, only sad because her laughter sounded so alive. The castle now stands as a museum, open to the curious and the brave. But some nights when the fog thickens and the sea wind presses against the windows, those who stay too long swear the house awakens, not in anger, but in memory. A grand home still waiting for its family to come back through the door. Far inland, beyond Victoria's gentle lights, another story waits. Darker, quieter, and more tragic. On the outskirts of Kamloops, beside the Thompson River, lies what remains of the Tranquil Sanatorium. In daylight, it looks like a collection of abandoned buildings, cracked windows, ivy crawling up red brick walls. But as the sun drops, it becomes something else entirely, a place where even the air feels cautious. Tranquil began in 1907 as a tuberculosis hospital, caring for those shunned by the world. It later became a psychiatric facility and finally an empty shell of both. Thousands passed through its halls, patients, nurses, children, and many never left. The echoes here are not of one spirit, but of 1,000 quiet goodbyes. Urban explorers who venture inside tell of hearing faint coughing in the corridors, the creak of a wheelchair moving by itself, and the soft ring of a bell that hasn't worked in half a century. In the tunnels beneath the main building, long, low passageways once used to move supplies unseen, shadows move even when no light shines. One photographer left his camera recording overnight and captured the faint sound of humming. A woman's voice, gentle and unbroken, somewhere deep in the dark. Locals say the spirits here are not restless, they are weary. They linger because kindness once lived here, and perhaps, in some way, still does. Even the wind that moves through the empty halls seems careful, as though afraid to disturb what remains. When the moon rises over the Thompson River, and the fog lifts just enough to see the reflection of the buildings on the water, Tranquil feels almost peaceful, like a memory that knows it cannot return, but refuses to vanish entirely. And then, the forest grows deeper. Beyond Kamloops, the wilderness thickens into something vast and quiet, and the road north begins to fade into shadow. There, the air grows sharper, the nights colder, and the line between the living and the remembered becomes almost invisible. If the soul of Canada could be heard, it would not speak loudly. It would whisper, through the wind sweeping the tundra, through the creak of ice shifting in the long northern night. Here, in the forgotten reaches of the Northwest Territories, lies a valley so haunted that even time itself seems reluctant to enter. They call it the Nahanni Valley, or as some early explorers named it, the Valley of the Headless Men. The story begins at the turn of the 20th century, when prospectors, chasing gold dust and legend, followed the South Nahanni River deep into the Mackenzie Mountains. Two brothers, Willie and Frank McLeod, were among them. They were experienced woodsmen, born to the rhythm of the wild. But one winter, they vanished. When their remains were found months later, a single detail turned curiosity into legend. Both men had been decapitated. Their gold had been scattered, their camp undisturbed, their bodies eerily untouched except for that one gruesome absence. No one could explain it. Theories spread like wildfire. Wild animals, rival miners, curses, even something older, something that had lived in the valley before men came with maps and ambition. Over the next few decades, more explorers disappeared, or were found headless, mutilated, or simply gone. Each new report added to the valley's reputation as cursed, until even the bravest trappers avoided it. To the local Dean people, the valley had always been sacred, a place to be respected, never claimed. They spoke of spirits that guarded its hidden caves, and of a heat that rose from beneath the earth, keeping parts of the valley mysteriously green even in the dead of winter. Some believe that heat comes from volcanic vents. Others say it is something else, the pulse of the land itself, older than science, older than our fear. A few pilots who have flown over the valley report seeing strange lights, orbs moving beneath the forest canopy, drifting as though guided by unseen hands. A geologist once called the Nahanni a place where geography meets myth. But to those who've heard the wind there, it feels more like a place where the two have already merged. There are still expeditions today. Small teams, quietly funded, who camp along the frozen river, recording sounds, measuring temperatures, setting cameras that almost always fail by morning. They come back with stories of whispering at the edge of sleep, of footprints that appear in fresh snow then stop, mid-stride, of the faint sound of something heavy dragging against stone deep within the canyon walls. To this day, no one knows what happened to the McLeod brothers, but locals will tell you the valley remembers them, and if you stand there long enough, listening to the wind, it begins to sound like two voices, still searching, still lost, still echoing across the centuries. The Bedtime, the ghost ship of the Arctic. Far to the northwest, where the ocean freezes solid and the horizon disappears into white, another ghost drifts, not of flesh and bone, but of steel and sorrow. Her name was the SS Bedtime, a sturdy cargo ship built in 1914. For years, she carried furs across the Arctic for the Hudson's Bay Company, braving the ice, the storms, and the endless cold. But in October of 1931, trapped by thick ice near Alaska's north coast, the crew abandoned ship, believing she would soon sink. When they returned weeks later, she was gone. Vanished. Not a splinter, not a ripple, just gone. Then, months later, the impossible happened. She was spotted again, floating freely, perfectly intact, miles from where she'd been lost. And then again, and again. Over the next 40 years, she was seen dozens of times, drifting silently through the frozen sea, a ghost ship of the Arctic. Sometimes she appeared near the shore, her decks glimmering with frost under the moonlight. Sometimes far out at sea, moving slowly against the current. No one ever found a soul aboard. No one ever claimed her. No one could explain how she survived unbroken for decades in a sea that swallows steel and bone alike. In 1969, a crew reported seeing her once more, leaning slightly, paint peeled, but still afloat. By the time rescue teams arrived, she was gone again, swallowed by fog and time. No confirmed sighting has ever been made since. But fishermen still tell of strange lights on calm nights, a faint glow on the horizon where no ship should be. Some say it's the Bedtime, still wandering, her captain long gone but her duty unfulfilled. Others whisper that the Arctic does not let go of what it claims, that the Bedtime was never lost, merely transformed. And maybe, on the quietest nights, when the ice groans and the sky dances with pale green light, her silhouette still moves among the floes, carrying the ghosts of sailors who refuse to stop sailing. Epilogue. Where the spirits still whisper. From the lighthouses of Nova Scotia to the frozen seas of the Arctic, the ghosts of Canada do not haunt. They remember. They linger in the corners of castles, in the tunnels of asylums, in the echo of a ship's bell over ice. They are the soft hum of what once was, carried on wind and water. Perhaps that is what makes these places truly haunted, not the fear they inspire, but the memory they refuse to surrender. Every flicker of a candle in an empty room, every note of music from nowhere, is not a threat. It is a story still being told. And when the night deepens, when the cold begins to speak, one truth becomes clear. The past does not die here. It drifts, it whispers, and sometimes